How you doing, sir?
What's going on? You can hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Awesome.
Awesome. Everything's all good?
I believe so. I have no complaints.
No
I
complaints at all.
wasn't prepared for an hour, but let's see what we do.
I fooled you, huh? Yeah, so you ready? Everything checks out?
Yeah, got it. You know, I'm going to do my best as we talk about like path of least resistance. So I'm gonna do my best. I'm not gonna put any pressure on either one of us, but I'm not gonna embarrass us either. So
No, but you're live now, so I'm going to let you know you're live.
okay.
Okay.
I thought it would be 5 on the dot. So
No, we're live.
okay.
One thing about the Drive at 5, we're always live. So, okay, so let me know when you're ready, and then we'll do a countdown. So just let me know when you're ready.
How many commercial breaks? None.
We're gonna go straight through.
Okay. All right, I'm ready.
All right. So we're gonna start in. Go ahead. I'm sorry, sir.
I'm gonna follow your lead.
Oh, well, that's going to be pretty hard.
I mean, as far as the process of questions, you starting like
no, I'm just joking with you.
Oh, okay. Gotcha.
Okay, so if anything else, we're going to start in 3, 2, 1. Good evening and welcome to the Drive at 5 on IntellectualRadio.com/iHeart radio station. I'm your host, Roman, coming to you via Zoom today. Please don't forget to stay tuned to IntellectualRadio.com/iHeart radio station after the Drive at 5 for Warriors Talk with Rochelle at 6 p.m. Tonight, my guest via Zoom is an educator, doctoral candidate, and author of the book entitled The Simplicity of Greatness. Please give a Drive at 5 welcome back to Sam Iarko. Welcome back to the Drive, sir.
Thank you. That's Samuel Ajarko. GY makes
Ajarko, okay.
It's okay. It's okay.
I always butcher it, right?
Right. Hey, I've been hearing my name butchered since kindergarten.
Okay. So Sam Giarco, correct?
Jarko.
Yarko. Okay.
The GY makes the J sound like if you're going to the gym. Jarko.
Okay. Jarko.
Yep.
Okay. So please give IntellectualRadio.com/iHeart radio station an update since the last time you were on the Drive.
Okay. Well, I don't know who all remembers me from my first visit to the Drive ages ago. I'm still teaching AP Computer Science principles. I'm still running my nonprofit, the A-Team Educational Consulting and Response to Intervention Services. I am still consulting, writing curriculum, and trying to increase people's awareness of their role in education and in their role in developing their plan for success. That was the reason for me writing the book, The Simplicity of Greatness. Education is 2% Black male. I wanted to increase my access. So I wrote a book, got it in a couple of school libraries, and I have it in a Black woman-owned bookstore called the Rose Cafe in Roseland. And I am also available, or the book is also available on Audible and Amazon. So you can get it anywhere that you're located. And the goal is to increase people's understanding of their role in education and help them develop their plan for success. It's a book for families, for young people, and for anybody who's trying to prepare themselves to have that difficult conversation with today's youth.
So please tell us a little bit about your book, The Simplicity of Greatness.
What I found in my years of education was that oftentimes, the coursework was 50% of my effort. And I'll elaborate. They wanted me to teach applied computer science and computer information systems, business law, media tech, education and career technology, and things of that nature. But oftentimes students will come to me and want to talk about their plans for the future, their formative years as far as their acquisition of resources and skill sets to become independent. And what I realized is a lot of our students who struggled compared to a lot of our students who are successful, they felt, so to speak, that the students that were successful were kind of anointed and kind of lucky in that regard. And I wanted to have a conversation about the commonality of the human experience and how, even though the A students may seem to have more success compared to our struggling students, that it was all about their mindset and their perspective. And that it wasn't that they were any different or special in any regard. They seemed to be able to recognize their opportunities, recognize who was a better advisor, and utilize their time wisely. And so I didn't want students to think, because I'm an educator, because my background was in computer science, computational thinking, economics, and all of those things, that I was somehow preaching from on high. I wanted to tell them my experience as far as, my formative years from elementary school, high school, and college and things of that nature, and how I had to, growing up the son of immigrants, I had to learn how to develop my own plan for success. And so I would often put students in a forum where I would have the A students and the struggling students have conversation, and they recognized that they had more in common than they realized. And so it made success a lot more accessible, right? And so that's why I try to tell the students that to be great is really simple. You can't take a shortcut to greatness and things of that nature. So I shared my experiences as a student, becoming a teacher, becoming a man, and things of that nature. I did it with, a culturally responsive mechanism, utilizing the music that I listened to during those times. So I wrote the book stylistically, so there are no chapter 1s, chapter 2s, chapter 3s, things of that nature. The concept is broken down or separated by verses from some of my favorite music during that time. So it can show the matriculation and growth from boy to man, from student to educator, and from, not having a plan for success, and each step that I took to develop that plan for success.
Why you think a conversation is strongly needed regarding today's Black youth versus 5 or 6 years ago, according to your book? You're saying that a conversation needs to be met. Can you elaborate on that?
Well, it's my personal opinion that there's a lot of the generational gap has furthered the disconnect between, the youth and the people that are responsible for governing them or providing a steward to success. When we grew up, we had a lot more hands on deck. You had grandmas, you had neighbors, you had more people who were willing to pour knowledge into you, and we were more receptive of that knowledge. But I think as when we deal with the modern time, because we feel those gaps and those opportunities to have discussion with social media, with disconnected input, it's hard for students, or it's hard for young people to actually tap into their discernment. So we need to have these conversations, because we cared about education and we cared about ourselves because an adult who cared about us created that valuation system for us. Whereas this generation has so many inputs from differing perspectives that validates every perspective, that it's hard for them to utilize their burgeoning discernment to thusly make wise decisions. And so oftentimes they think greatness, or they think someone who is successful did perform some type of magic trick, or was, lucky to a certain degree. And mind you, stars have to align up and things of that nature. But that doesn't mean you shouldn't do your part to ensure that you are positioned to get the most success that you can at the level that you are.
I hear you, but we're going to pause on that because I got a follow-up question, but it gears to this question that's coming up, what you just said. Today's educator, in order to teach at a school in Chicago, you have to be a psychologist, a security guard, a custodian, a parent, a social worker at the same time, other than educating, especially in a predominantly Black school. Fights are an everyday occurrence now in Chicago public schools. Chicago public schools are now currently wondering why there is a shortage of teachers, especially in Black men. What is your assessment of that situation, given you are an educator and what I just said?
Well, I think teachers have always had to adopt that role, but we had more societal support. Whereas nowadays, going back to what I was saying initially, I think a lot of people don't really understand their role in education. And then the fights and things of that nature are more reflective of, I would say, like a collapse in a societal construct. The economy is bad. You have more politicians who are in it for the money and have to appease multiple constituents and actually have a set agenda that they have conviction about and things of that nature. When I grew up, I had teachers who poured into me beyond the content area, but I also had the family structure or neighborhood structure, or even if we would have utilized just, the gang culture, certain young people were off limits. There was still some form of structure that helps align students to their strengths or help align students to their success path. Whereas nowadays, because of the vast majority of students who are locked into social media and they have different viewpoints where they don't have the discernment to determine which one suits them, it prevents them from aligning themselves to a success path that is beneficial to them. Most students believe that they can be an entrepreneurship. They could be an entrepreneur without having developed a work ethic and things of that nature. And if there was, again, in my personal opinion, more connection between people in our age group or people who are older than them, we can create the valuation for them or the values that's necessary for them to govern themselves in different situations.
Do you think that today's generation thinks that everything's supposed to be handed to them instead of earning it?
I do, but it's not an innate behavior. I think as the modern society is more based on consumerism. So they'll sell you whatever dream if you'll purchase it, right? So the vast majority of students are bombarded with images of entrepreneur success without the path to entrepreneurship as far as the struggling, finding resources, developing their network and things of that nature. So when I have conversations with students who are like, I'm gonna just start a business or I'm gonna just sell a t-shirt and things of that nature, they have not had they've seen the success stories, but those people have, because of that disconnect, those people who are successful in entrepreneurship have not really told them the true path of entrepreneurship. Even if they wanted to become a rapper hasn't told them about, how much work ethic is necessary to be a success story. So it seems easy, right? But they have not committed themselves to the steps to put themselves in a position to really have real success.
Do you think today's generation you think they're easy to give up when it comes to a challenge?
I don't. I really don't. I think it's a lack of stewardship, honestly. Again, it goes back to the generational disconnect, right? They know they don't want to struggle. Like we've had our conversations where I say a lot of Black and brown people are programmed to believe in the nobility of struggling. So a vast majority of people have committed themselves to toiling and working a job just to look forward to Saturday to get back to doing it Monday. And they know they don't want to do that. So the appeal of fast money or the appeal of entrepreneurship, it's a logical bad decision, right? Because the path of least resistance is logical, right? Who wants to toil? Who wants that? So the young people understand that. And when you have that coupled with a terrible economy, then fast money seems like a viable decision, right? Whereas if they had the generation, if we had more mentors, we had more people willing to have these conversations with young people to tell them that you are fundamentally delaying the work. There is no skipping the work, right? There is no you write one song and you're the next Jay-Z. There's a saying that it takes 15 years to be an overnight success. No one is having that conversation with them, right? No one is showing them the ins and outs of selling, developing a clothing line, the ins and out of developing a snow removal business or something of that nature, right? A lot of my students want to learn about NFTs and Bitcoin and things of that nature, but they haven't, it seems so inaccessible to them because no one has told them how simple it is, right? So the responsibility, I believe, for the vast majority of us teachers is to rob students of the excuse that no one ever told them. So I believe that there's hope in the youth because they're using the little bit of discernment that they have to say, like, I don't want to toil, but then there's a gap where there needs to be filled with people of purpose, people of virtue, people of integrity that are like, okay, you may not want to go to college. You might want to go into the trades. Let me show you how. There's no one to do the comparative analysis of a carjacker makes this amount of money, but a person who works as an electrician makes this, a master electrician makes this. No one has the conversations with them about a union union painter or a building custodian or a building engineer or a garbage man or a car salesman makes this. They don't know what they don't know. And as we are, furthering, entering a post-intellect era where you have the abundance of different invalidated information minus a quality steward, it will lead students to make these bad decisions.
So it brings me to this question. Is there an educational divide between Black schools resulting to the youth saying, if you don't care about my education, why should I? Your thoughts on that? Because you're saying that, okay, the information is there, but they have to decipher.
I'm saying the information is inaccessible without a steward, right? And it goes back to what I'm saying about the generational gap. It wasn't just your teacher who created the value of education. Your parent did, your granny did, right? Your pastor did, things of that nature. And as we become more of a consumer-based everything is inflation has led to the increase in costs as the decline in quality jobs. So you have parents who are always at work who don't have the time to pour into their children. There's a disconnect generationally as kids are not being poured into by grannies or grandparents or things of that nature who are telling them about historical struggles to get this opportunity that they have. Those gaps are being filled by a social media influencer who is making it seem like success is just, a rap song away, or you can sell this t-shirt and do this, that, and the third. Now, when I'm talking about the simplicity of greatness, the steps to greatness, I see it's habitual, right? So that's what makes greatness, simple, but it's still work. It's work involved. It's personal responsibility involved.
So basically, you're saying that, okay, regarding the educational divide, do you agree there is an educational divide that's currently going on today?
What do you mean by divide?
Educational divide, what I mean, like in Black schools and Black youth, and basically the education component in comparison to other schools. You mentioned parents, they work a lot. You mentioned some type of commonality when it comes to educational values. However, there are certain schools that doesn't teach that. There are certain schools that goes by the book.
Well, it's not necessarily that most. All right. So if you are if I'm trying to read between the lines, are you doing a comparative analysis between like white schools and Black schools?
I'm doing a comparison analysis of, yes, a white school
Well,
versus a black school.
historically in education, the most successful demographic are white families because they have the resources, right? Like, money for schools come from property taxes. So an area that's paying 20 grand a year in property taxes has, just doing the basic math, has more resources than a school, than an area that's paying 2,000 in property taxes. So educational policy.
But can I stop you there for one
Go ahead.
second? 1 second. Okay, you mentioned property taxes. Okay, that's fine. I can agree with you on that one. But given what is going on now, that African American communities are paying more than their fair share of property taxes, more of value, again, you're saying it's supposed to go to education. Where is that money going to if they're paying more in taxes than what they should?
No, that's not what I'm saying. The money for schools is based off of locale, right? So a school in Evanston, right? All of the houses are paying 20 grand a year. A significant portion of the property taxes go into the school. There's more resources available, right, than there are in Black and brown communities, based off of how educational policy is constructed. But historically, we've been able to offset some of that by having a valuation system where, despite what I'm dealing with, I have to get this education. I have to make it out of my community and things of that nature. What I'm saying is now we have more messages that are saying education isn't the way, they should have taught us this in school, things of that nature. And I can go the entrepreneurship route, which lessens the value of education. You can hear in society and hear how people talk about, they blame the teachers, right? As opposed to really looking at educational policy that has put America overall, despite color, 28th in math, 32nd in math and science for the last 30 years, right? But we're now paying attention because we're inconvenienced. That's what I'm saying. The generational gap is more detrimental to us because we don't have the resources to offset that. Whereas in a more well-resourced community, even if I'm not available, I can pay for a tutor. I can send you to a course. I can send you to a workshop, things of that nature. But in our community, we don't have the length of leash to make the same mistakes.
Now it goes back to what we're enduring now, and that is remote learning. Is remote learning causing some of these problems in the classroom? What are your thoughts on that?
I think remote learning is revealing, like I just said, like education has fundamentally been on the decline for 30 years, right? I think education is just, remote learning is just revealing the lack of strategy by leadership, right? My background, again, is in applied computer information systems and economics. Computer science is what I teach. I've been doing this, been teaching 15 years. And I watch leaders conflate the presence of technology with technology integration, right? So had you been prepared, like we're not going to always be going to a brick and mortar school. As just a fact, in the year 3000, people are not going to be getting on yellow school buses and things of that nature. So you have to be more proactive as opposed to retroactive. So the vast majority of leaders in the educational system are really just being caught with their pants down, right? You gave Chromebooks and patted yourselves on the back, but you didn't make certain that the parents knew how to use the applications to support you, hence the generational gap and digital divide. You didn't make sure these parents had Wi-Fi. You didn't make sure, their support system. I'm not going to just put it all on parents, but you didn't make sure any of these kids' support systems knew how to utilize these things, right? So now you have students who have, because of the pandemic, been desocialized because they haven't been in the school system. They haven't gotten the real support because say I need a speech pathologist or say I need to have a discussion with my therapist and I'm in a household where no one knows how to use Zoom. So now I'm not getting the services that I need and things of that nature. So this leads to the data showing a decline and people are blaming teachers, but this is a reflection of leadership, right? So
you're pointing the finger at both. Am I correct?
See, the thing is, we're in an era where people want to have, it's either this person's fault or it's this person's fault. And what I'm saying is it is a systematic societal issue. It isn't singular. Like, yeah, you can point out teachers who don't care. And yeah, you can point out teachers who half-assed it and things of that nature. But you can also look at educational policy, which fundamentally violates the 10th Amendment, because the 10th Amendment says we shouldn't have federalism where there's a blanket solution to local problems, right? So now, because you blanketly said money for schools come from property taxes without looking at the differences in property taxes, you inherently put a Black and brown school behind, because we don't collect as much taxes from those communities as you do from people who own their homes and own bigger homes, right? When I grew up, education was 2% Black male, right? It's still 2% Black male. So you've not done a great job of recruiting Black men into the field, right? That's not a teacher level issue. That's an educational policy and leadership issue, right? Now with educational policy, you've tied accountability measures to evaluations. So teachers are now put in a position where they have to secure the scores so this school can get the funding. Who do you think if I'm a school getting 2,000 and you a school that's getting 20,000, who do you think is already behind the 8 ball? So now what is the incentive for teachers to create challenging curriculum and things of that nature if the onus is on me to secure the scores to get the funding to help little Johnny? It's an educational policy thing.
So you're saying we need to change policy, or is it Black leadership that needs to change the policy?
All right, so this is the thing, it's like, I'm looking at Florida and how Florida is gaslighting parents, like, we're gonna now let you have access to curriculum and blah, 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 this, that, and the third. Educational policy never denied you that. Educational policy does not put teachers or educational systems in the position to supersede parental rights. It just doesn't. In vast majority of school districts, the curriculum, first of all, the standards that teachers have to teach to are state standards. So the states provide the standards that we have to teach to. You go to most school websites, the curriculum is on the website. So no one's denying you anything, right? But because there's a disconnect between the role, there's a generational disconnect, right? Then there is a disconnect between parents and teachers. Then there is a disconnect as far as people understanding their role in education and their role in stewarding their kids. People fundamentally drop their kids off at 7 and like have them fixed by 3 and I'll pick them up. They don't understand that it's a relationship, right? Between a parent and the teacher that pours into this child. The kid should already come with evaluation of education, and he should already come disciplined. And then I can spend most of my time pouring into him the knowledge that'll make him successful in the long run, as opposed to serving like our teachers did and like our teachers have to do now, therapists, custodians, and things of that nature, all right? Schools are overworked and teachers are overworked because the educational policy is just not sufficient. Now, now you were able to put a Band-Aid on a gunshot wound. People didn't really know what was going on to a certain degree. The educational policy has affected how challenging a curriculum will be. It has been standardized. We've all heard of the term teach to the test and things of that nature. Some school districts don't allow you to give zeros because money comes from scoring and money comes from daily attendance and things of that nature. So you, as a teacher, have now had your legs cut to provide consequences, to provide challenging curriculum. And then 4 to 8 years from now, this kid is going to be like, you should have taught me credit. You should have taught me this. You should have taught me that. But it's educational policy that is putting a cap on certain things, right? Even some of the principals in school systems don't have an educational background because they don't want you to have a frame of reference like a teacher to push back. They want you to exact educational policy.
Speaking of policy, do you think the problem is the lack of social interaction in today's Black youth, resulting to more fighting in school?
Oh, it definitely
can. And you're mentioning policy as, let's say, one of the problems with what's going on in the educational system today, that that it's not just one person's fault, but do you think the social interaction in today's Black youth resulting to the problems that you see in schools today?
Oh yeah, I mentioned the socialization, for example, like when we grew up, I'm 41. When I grew up, eighth graders were 13, freshmen were 14, right? I hope people following me with my logic here. Eighth graders were 13, freshmen were 14. The newspaper was written at an eighth grade level. You had, we were still into the, so to speak, to me, I believe we're in a post-intellect era where, like, if you presented an idea and it was wrong or something of that nature, they corrected it, people were accountable, people provided consequences, things of that nature. Now you fast forward, the average freshman is like 14 and a half, 15, newspaper written like at a sixth grade level. So you see how the gap in intellectual capacity to comprehend is getting wider. And then you had the pandemic where kids were desocialized for another year, right? So they might be 15, but they're 12, right? They don't have control over their emotions and they're easily malleable, which is why the generational disconnect is problematic, because then who is shaping the minds of your child? If you're leaving it to a social media app, if you're leaving it to a social influencer, even if they're wrong, even if they're a terrible person, they have 1 million followers that validates that their line of reason might be viable. Because if we don't create the evaluation system immediately, someone else will. And we're in a consumer world where that influencer doesn't care about the integrity of what they're doing. They're looking for another customer. So because they're
getting paid for the likes, and they're getting, not for the content, they're getting paid to more people that watch them or hit their links, they get paid for it.
Data analytics. Back then, it mattered who liked you. It mattered your wins. Now it just matters the clicks. It's almost like, what Donald Trump said. If they talking about me, they're not talking about you. Back in the day, they used to care what was being said about them. Now they don't, as long as they're not talking about you. So then that leads, like, there's less people in these positions that our kids listen to that have integrity, that care about their turnout. But if we're not taking ownership of that particular piece of the problem and creating value in education for our kids, then why would they value the school setting? Why would they value being in the classroom? Especially when educational policy, for example, SB 100 was a law that passed, and it was the intention was great. They recognized that they was.
Wait a minute, can you define that law for our
Senate Bill 100? I'm in the middle. I'm about to do it right now. SB 100 or Senate Bill 100 pretty much said that we were, assigning consequences too much to, black and brown kids. And so you have to have like response to intervention and multi-tier support services and things of that nature. But you have leaders who are like, well, because we suspend kids too much, as opposed to like teaching them the value of education, things of that nature, they're like, well, we're not going to suspend them for, we're not going to provide a consequence for sagging in the school setting. We're not going to provide a consequence for, midriff showing in the school setting. We're not going to provide a consequence for kids being on their cell phone in the school, right? We're not going to provide a consequence for a kid eating outside, somehow getting outside food into the building, right? So now, because we're not holding kids accountable, coupled with educational policy that some educational leaders are interpreting as, we don't give zeros, we're going to give them 50% if they don't turn in anything, and then we give unlimited do-overs on tests, right? So how are we creating the value of education? How are we pouring into kids and teaching them right from wrong when we don't assign consequences and things of that nature? So that's what I'm saying. It's beyond just an individual role. Because like I said, you can identify teachers who don't care. You can identify teachers who are not culturally responsible, but they're not going to survive education because they still got to get evaluated. There's no way they could be in it 20, 30 years like that, right? And then because you have society who is joining in blaming teachers for the decline in society, right? How are you going to recruit people into the field? How are you going to recruit people? How are you going to convince people to go into this field?
Well, currently they're trying to get substitute teachers, especially Black
And then they
males.
lowered the standard of who could be a substitute teacher.
Correct. Yes,
right?
They have. Right.
So then how does that help? These are rhetorical questions. I already know the answer.
Well, answer it for us.
It's not. It's not going to help.
Is it going to create more problems, you say?
You say what now?
It's going to create more problems.
Oh, it's going to create much more of a decline because you can't, it's not sustainable if you are trying to build knowledgeable people because they don't know the content. They just simply don't. You have reading teachers, you have English teachers. I'm AP computer science. You can't just find a sub who just like, well, I need the money or 75 to how much, whatever they're paying to just be in the classroom. Like they're not going to be able to teach coding. They're not going to be able to teach computational thinking. All right. They're not going to be able to have the conversation of NFTs and Bitcoin and blockchain and things of that nature. They're not. I mean, you may look up and find them, but if they have that capacity, then why would they be subbing?
So let's turn the page here and basically define today's Black youth. Can you define today's Black youth for us?
I wouldn't. Again, I don't think in a black and white situation. I do believe in gray areas and things of that nature. It is not that simple to paint Black youth in. It's not even fair to paint them in one definition, right? They're not a monolith, right? So that would be my response to that question. They're not a monolith. So I wouldn't be able to define the Black youth of today. I could say that their problems stem from generational disconnect. A lot of their issues are rooted in a collapse in a societal construct, right? The economy is bad. And no one is creating value in education and providing an opportunity for them to learn a trade or provide. Like people will talk about the youth, but they won't even have lunch with a youth that's related to them, right? To do pouring at the family level, right? So with this generational disconnect, they don't really understand how the world is working. They're being, inundated with images of quick money and quick success, which is why scamming has become so popular, which is why carjacking has become so popular and things of that nature, which is most youth, their behavior is not like, oh, they're demons or something of that nature. It is a crime of economics. Like, we're not mass shooters. We're not out here, our culture is not like, we're not really known for, even though mental health is real, we suffer, like vast majority of my students have lost more people in their life than I've lost at 41. They're dealing with PTSD, things of that nature. When you talk to them, the vast majority of them won't have a conversation that is like, future tense. They're not thinking of themselves as old men. They're not thinking of themselves as old women and things of that nature. So why do we have the expectation that they will value their life as if they expect to have a long one? It almost reminds me of an interview with Mike Tyson when he was saying, look at me, I'm 40. Who would have thought I lived that long? And it's 40. Most of the people that they love died before 30. Their best friends are getting murdered, things of that nature. So if we're not pouring into those gaps and creating those values for those kids, then if I can get a truck or carjack somebody right now and get the money, why would I wait 4 years for a cap and gown to fill out applications and hopefully pay off loan, right? So if college is not the way, then we need to be showing them like HVAC is the way. Here's how much money you can make. Car salesmen make this on the average. Janitor, entrepreneurs who like have their own maid services, snow removal does this and third. We have to fill those gaps that are being filled with the idea of quick money.
What is your interpretation of what is going on with today's Black youth?
My interpretation is they are closer to the effects of a societal fail than we are. So it's easier for like the adults, it's easier for the vast majority of people to sit on their perch and be like, these kids these days, this, that, and the third. But what have you done to pour into a youth? That's not really the vast majority of, I would tell parents sometimes, like, I know your kid more than you. You drop them off at 7, they get home at like 5, you still at work. When you guys get home, you both on your cell phone, you're watching your latest show, he goes to bed, the cycle, or she goes to bed, the cycle repeats. Those opportunities to talk about your kid's future, their evaluation, how they think, don't miss those opportunities. Don't repeat generational cycles of do it because I said so, and now you're an authoritarian parent where your kid doesn't talk to you. Right. And you miss all of these opportunities to get their perspective, to shape and mold and impart knowledge and value into them, or at least create the evaluation system so they're able to use their discernment to know what's right and what's wrong.
Well, is there a divide amongst today's Black youth? You mentioned there's a cycle. How can you break the cycle? And it seems like there is a divide amongst today's Black youth.
Parents and the youth, divide between the kids themselves.
The kids themselves.
But so the divide. Give me
go
an
ahead.
example.
Go ahead.
What do you mean?
Okay. The first question is, you mentioned about the so-called let's say how there's a cycle. And my question, which is a follow-up, how can you break the cycle?
By being more involved. And that's at every level. Like, you can look at you can look at a society, this as a societal issue, right? Like, our politicians who are in place to impose the educational policy and, who wrote the educational policy, mind you, without the input of teachers, right? You don't hold them accountable. How do you get 30 years of terrible policy and then you only involve yourself when, your kid has to stay home during a pandemic? And then now you notice that there's no support, for, you as a parent, or there was no training for you to learn how to use the applications to support your kid and things of that nature. Like, you can't be inactive in politics until it inconveniences you, because by then it's too late, right? Like, if you eat, like, comparatively, like in Texas, they're trying to do away with Roe versus Wade and infringe upon women's rights, right? But it sounds new because you're not participating in politics like you should. They had to go through 133 counties and districts in order to get that on the books. You should have been involved by District 3. Now it's a national phenomenon. You're involved. You have to be hands on deck. These are your babies. So yeah, if you identify a crappy teacher, hold them accountable. If you identify a crappy principal, hold them accountable. If you identify a mayor that lacks conviction, because at the end of the day, most politicians are at the behest of their constituents. They're not doing what's best for your child. If you know these things, if you're paying attention to those things, leverage your vote. Leverage your vote. And then you can only control what you can do in your household. So if you're recognizing that your child isn't reading, you're recognizing that your child doesn't have work ethic, because it's almost transferable, right? If you have work ethic, if you have character, it's going to reveal itself every opportunity it has. So if you're recognizing that your child isn't putting in the work, then you need to rectify that. Because by the time they get 18 and they out here, it's like one of my favorite rappers say, Conway, everybody is fooled.
Now it goes to the question that I asked you before. Is there a divide amongst today's Black youth?
A divide in what regard? Be specific with this question.
Well, in what regard is you see that some Black youths are trying. They're going to school. They're trying to communicate. They're trying to break the cycle.
Okay, so now you have to have a
are,
nuanced conversation. So those kids who are trying might have the support system that's necessary. They might have a parent that, and I know I'm not putting it all on parents because you're doing the best that you can. Like, we have to trust that you're doing the best that you can. We have to trust that the vast majority of teachers are doing the best that they can. They paint this narrative that teachers don't want to work. That's why they want to stay at home and don't want to do remote learning and blah, 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 this, that, and the third. There was no plan in place. There was no plan in place. And the plans don't come from the teacher. We're the labor force, fundamentally. The plan comes from leadership. And I'm not even at the local level, at the state level. There was no plan.
But why is that not interpreted through the media?
Because he who controls the media controls the narrative. Like, for example, there's a CTU website where all of the teachers' concerns, the teachers' offers of solutions and things of that nature are there. Parents are not going to this website. And I'm not blaming them, but like, why would you? And then the media doesn't talk about the presence of this website. But they can talk about, like, Lori Lightfoot. She has the mic. Teachers don't.
Well, you have the mic right now. Can you give that website to us? So, I mean, and if not, what we can do is after the show, we'll post it. So
I got it saved as a bookmark, but I don't have it off the top of my head. But it's the CTU website. It's the Chicago Teacher Union. You can put it in Google and you can find those things. If you're concerned about the curriculum that your teacher, your student is exposed to, you can go to the ISB website. The standards come from the state. We're the labor force. It's like being mad at the cashier because the price went up. Like, I ain't got nothing to do with that. I still got to ring you up for the price that the leadership changed it to. Oh, we don't offer that product anymore. That's not the cashier or the stock person's fault. That's the company's fault. So if that curriculum isn't offered anymore, or it's not challenged anymore, it's not a whole bunch of teachers who are like, let's provide lower quality education and lessen the consequences that we, like, there's no teacher saying this. But it's easy to paint, you have to find a bad guy when you don't want to be accountable, right? Like, J.B. Pritzker closed Chicago down during the pandemic. He's not going to do it again because he wants to win re-election. Not saying like I have the inside scoop of things of that nature, but logically, he wants to win re-election. Chicago blue, Chicago Democratic, but all of Illinois is not. You see what I'm saying? Politicians are beholden to their constituents, not to your children.
And that's one of the biggest problems.
That is a huge problem. That's why, do you honestly think a politician wants to go back and work a 9-to-5 job and go through evaluations and things of that nature, or do they want to keep a federal job where they get, they're going to tell you they're going to always avoid accountability wherever they can. They really got people believing that teachers don't want to go back to the building because they want to stay at home. And any teacher you would talk to is telling you remote learning is a fail. Not because of the teacher. The teacher didn't all of a sudden lose the ability to teach or have content. We have blank screens because you're not making your kid log in. Your kid has heard you talk about, teachers don't know everything, or teachers this, that, and the third. But if you've helped contribute to the invalidation of the profession, right? You got running jokes on sitcoms and movies about the profession. And then lo and behold, you're like, why is there a teacher shortage?
Well, what do you think is the root of the problem in today's Black youth?
A poor economy, generational disconnect, the lack of culturally responsive people who want to be vested in them, and educational policy. And the thing about it is educational policy, like No Child Left Behind, things of that nature, education has been on the decline for 30 years, 30 of them. So this isn't new. It's just that people are newly paying attention because they're supremely inconvenienced.
Some people think it is today's Black parents some Black parents, and I'm saying some, so here the content, some Black parents think and act like they're young instead of acting like a parent, resulting to their children acting like them or at times the man that they are involved with. What are your thoughts on the evaluation, as you put it? Kids are raising kids and parents are not acting like parents.
Well, I'm not here to vilify parents. I believe there are some quality parents. There's some, great mothers. There's some vested fathers and things of that nature. I think if you were to look at everything and how it is correlated, the lack of resources, overworking, kids, the generation, all of the things that I mentioned. I don't want to just vilify parents, but there have always been like terrible parents. There have always been, like, we didn't grow up with all of the, like, in our age group, things of that nature. There always hasn't been like great parents, 100% great parents, 100% opportunity. But those gaps were filled by like a grandmother, a mentor in the neighborhood, a coach, right? A pastor, a big homie. Like, there are so many NBA players who could attest to, like, even the gangs were like, nah, you got a shot, don't come over here. I experienced that. Nah, college boy, this ain't for you, right? But now that involvement is not there, which contributes to a generational disconnect. And then the kids are searching for stewardship or leadership without the practice of discernment and without their principles and values being shaped by the people, their support systems that they trust. They are being led astray by anything and everything that they see that looks like success.
Do you think the Black community has turned into a dark culture because of what's going on in the streets regarding our Black youth? We mentioned the music, we mentioned the social media, we talked about the education. Do you think that the Black community?
No, I don't. You know why? The vast majority of people who have comments about the youth don't deal with the youth, don't teach the youth, any of that nature, right? And we already talked about how a narrative is controlled. There are 6 media groups that own all of the TV stations and things of that nature, and their goal is to push ratings. So they're going to focus on a shooting. They're going to focus on a carjacking and things of that nature. But to be immersed in the youth, I still have hope. Even like the vast majority, like when we grew up, our rappers, we had like, we didn't grow up with saints as rappers. We had Spice One, we had Tupac, we had, gangsters rapping, right? And they sold us the dream, and they made that seem so, they romanticized the gang culture. So that still is consistent. But what I will say is the some of the rappers and things of that nature that they listen to are having conversations about business, are having conversation about financial security. The kids, if you are creating that value for that child early enough, they'll have a filter of what they let in. If you teaching your kid about financial, like, hey, we got to get us out the hood, whatever, they're going to look at people who are successfully creating streams of income. If you are bragging to your kid about fast money and scamming, I've had students who come from a family of scammers. I've had students who come from a family of BDs or GDs who didn't even want the rank, but that's what their family did. So your support system matters. It absolutely matters. But if there is an attack on your support system economically, right, that even historically, when they were moving Black men from the household in order for you to get, if there is an attack on you, on your support system and through a societal construct, I tell people this all the time, a shift in societal construct is not voluntary. You didn't want to use a cell phone. They got rid of pay phones. You didn't want your father to be gone. They tied it to how you could get government resources. You don't want the decline in education. It's directly correlated to educational policy and leadership. So once people recognize their role, then they can do better to help prevent. They can do better to prevent the collapse.
Let's discuss about the violence that's going on, because our time is kind of shortening a little bit. More and more Black youth, ages range from 10 and up, are committing murders, carjackings, sexual assaults, and robberies. Today's crimes are being committed by a Black child as young as 5, 10, and 11 years old. This phenomenon now is becoming the norm on the streets of Chicago. Do you think crimes being committed by a child as young as 5 years old, 10, or 11 is a growing phenomenon on Chicago streets?
I think it can be, and it is, simply because, again, there's a lack of vision from the political leaders, and there's a terrible economy afoot. If you allow your kid to be exposed to something too soon without being taught their principles and shaping their evaluation, then it becomes destructively accessible. So you got 5 and 10-year-olds who are watching these videos, who are exposed to, carjacking and things of that nature. Then they have terrible leaders, so to speak, in their community who recognize that, oh, this kid is not going to get jail time or something of that nature, and puts a battery pack in this young person and convinces them to do these things because their principles have not been shaped at home. Their principles have not been shaped by their support system.
So if I'm listening to this, it literally scares me. The older generations are now afraid of their children, their nephews, and teenage sons and daughters. Should the older generations be scared of today's Black youth?
I'll say this. If you continue to disconnect, then it's just going to get worse. It's just going to get worse. If you continue to disconnect, and that means you disconnect from politics, you disconnect from from the youth as far as pouring into them and shaping values, you disconnect from your community, it's going to get worse.
So you're saying those things that people need to connect to in order to solve the disconnect in Black youth. Am I correct?
Yes, you need to be more hands-on deck. You needed to give a damn before it inconvenienced you.
Go ahead, I'm sorry.
I've been in education 15 years. I haven't seen 150 fathers. I only see the parents that have, 3.0s and up, or who already know that they're going to college. And I'm not going to say like the parents that I don't see are bad parents. Maybe they got to work during the times of parent-teacher conferences, right? But we've made it so accessible to be connected to a teacher via email, Impact, all of these available apps and things of that nature. If you can use your skills of deduction and induction to identify what Cardi B is wearing, if you can articulate what you don't know as you have a laptop in your hand, then you can do a little bit better than you are. Like before you became scared of your teenager, he was 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. You had all of this opportunity to shape it. People will say like, you went to school to be a teacher. I went to school to teach computer science, not to be a surrogate parent, not to be a therapist. Our counselors can't counsel because they have to do registration. The funding for schools, you got to rob Peter to pay Paul and things of that nature. We can't get parental advisory groups at some of the most struggling schools and things of that nature. Even and going back to leadership, you have parents who have to quit their jobs, right? Because they have to stay home. Where is leadership aligning these same people to remote jobs?
Trayvon Martin and the stereotypical Black youth are facing today on social media and beyond. Do you blame someone from overreacting if they see a Black youth or a Black youth walking in groups wearing hoodies, meaning the stereotypical type of, let's say, a carjacker or somebody robs? We're becoming in a society that it's wrong for us to react to everything. However, it's kind of like it's hard for us to react at all when it comes to the stereotype. What I mean by that, let me say that just in case you didn't follow me here. When it comes to overreaction, you hear, going back to the media, you hear that the description black hoodie or a hoodie, slender, pants down to his thighs,
Okay.
and you see a group of them. Usually we overreact. My question is, do you blame someone for overreacting when they see a Black youth wearing a hoodie? Or
It's the
do you?
same thing as a white woman clutching her purse when she sees you. She disconnected from the community, and so she lets a narrative paint the conclusive image of who I am. When I tell people I teach, they think I'm a gym teacher, and I'm talking to Black people, right? So it's, if you're disconnected, if you are disconnected, it is easy for me to paint a narrative. I don't feel threatened when I see teenagers.
Period.
I don't.
So let's go over it again, because we did mention solutions. What is the solution for steering today's Black youth to the right path?
More involvement from Black adults in every regard. Your kid who has never voted doesn't believe in voting because you don't vote. Your kid may not value education because you blame your shortcomings on the lack of, when we're talking about roles, right? When you talk to the average person, first of all, less than 1% of the world's population goes to college. So now we're talking about the vast majority of people that thusly have a secondary education. They went to school from 5 to 8, preschool to 18. There are an infinite amount of topics in the world. Are you telling me the expectation is that you to be exposed to this infinite amount of topics in the 4 years of education, when fundamentally it's 186 years times 4, so it's a 4-year time span, but you're in school 2 years? You don't understand the role of education. You don't understand the role of educators. Your ancestors learned reading, writing, arithmetic under the threat of death, and Madam C.J. Walker was a millionaire, and you got a laptop in your pocket. You don't understand your role. You don't understand the role of schools. You disconnect from politics. 36% of Americans vote. 64% are being governed by policy they don't even know. So when Fox is saying to a white person that a Black or a Muslim is coming from, they disconnected from the reality, so it's easy for them to accept that narrative. You have to participate in your survival. A government, an industry, and a policy is not responsible for you surviving evolution. It's the same as when you got coal miners. Now, coal miners is 99.7% white. We all know the most viable option is solar power if we're talking about natural energy. They want us to slow down the adoption of solar power to preserve their jobs. Nobody is responsible for you surviving evolution but you. So you can't be selective about what you participate in and then get mad when you're inconvenienced, when they've been doing this for 30 years. You have to be involved at the local level. You have to be involved at the state level. You have to be involved from birth. That's just it. This is the thing. You want to absolve yourself from guilt to say, as a parent, as the support system for this young person, I did everything I can. But you can't pat yourself on the back for delivery and pickups.
Period.
As the kids say. You
All
gotta keep
right.
it me, man. For real.
Yeah, you got to keep it 100. So please give IntellectualRadio.com/iHeartRadio station how they can get in contact with you and get your book again.
Again, my name is Sam Ajarko, doctoral candidate. I am research and educational policy. If you are looking for me, my email is right there, info@the ateamrti.org. My nonprofit, I keep sliding the wrong way, is the A-Team Educational Consulting and with Response to Intervention Services. And if you are looking for my book, The Simplicity of Greatness, it is available on Amazon, Audible, and at the Rose Cafe in Roseland. It is a Black woman-owned bookstore that is doing the work, bringing the books to the kids, not with the expectation. Like, you can't trust the experts as if all of the experts are honorable. So you have to be involved. You can't be like, well, I send them to school as if all schools are the same, and as if all of the people involved are integrous. You can't keep just trusting the politicians because they went to Yale as if all Yale graduates are integrous or have value. If you understood, and the reason why I talk about the 30 years and things of that nature, if you understood how America was royally changed after Ronald Reagan, you would be more involved.
Wow. You saved that Ronald Reagan comment just before, because, boy, I'm going to get you after this. All right, man. Don't be a stranger. Actually, you're going to come back in a couple of weeks regarding Black History Month. So we're going to have a discussion regarding the disparities of Blacks and Africans. So we're going to date to be announced. But it's always a pleasure having you, brother. So thank you for coming on the Drive at 5. And thank you for joining us. You guys have a wonderful week. Thanks to Earl Winfrey, our executive producer, Wanda, who's behind the scenes. You have a good week, everyone.
All right, you guys be good.